The seeds were in a coffee can. That's what Marcus kept thinking as he crawled through the collapsed basement of what used to be a Home Depot in Columbus, Ohio. A Maxwell House tin. Red lid. His daughter had painted her name on it with nail polish. Pink, chipped at the edges. He'd grabbed it the morning after the strikes because his hands needed something to hold. 18 months later, those seeds were the only reason 43 people were still breathing. But here's what no one talks about. The sky hasn't been blue in over 700 days. The sun, when it rises at all, looks like a bruise bleeding through smoke. Rain hasn't fallen in 11 weeks, and the last rainfall carried enough strontium-90 to dissolve the enamel off a grown man's teeth. And by month 19, and Marcus would do something no farmer, no human being, should ever have to do to keep a harvest alive. You don't want to miss what's inside that coffee can, or what it cost him. 714 days after the first warhead detonated over Washington, D.C. Columbus. Ohio sits at the edge of what survivors now call the Gray Belt, a swath of the American Midwest where the sky has not cleared since the early weeks of the war. What used to be a city of 900,000 people is now a silhouette. The Short North's murals are still visible if you know where to look, half buried under 2 feet of ash fall that arrived in the war's first winter and never fully left. The air smells of sulfur and wet concrete and something else, something organic and wrong, like a compost pile that's gone septic. In temperature averages 11 degrees Celsius lower than pre-war norms. This is textbook nuclear winter. The stratospheric soot layer from burning cities has reduced incoming solar radiation by nearly 70%, according to pre-war models from Rutgers University scientists who predicted exactly this scenario in 2019 and were largely ignored. The Scioto River runs the color of iron filings. No fish, no frogs. Silence where there used to be sound. What Columbus looks like now is what extinction looks like when it moves slowly, when it gives you just enough time to understand what you're losing. The people still alive in Columbus's interior are not the ones anyone predicted would make it. The wealthy fled first and died in traffic jams on I-70 when the secondary strikes hit. The prepper communities lasted longer, but most were raided by month 4. What remained were the people who had nowhere to go and enough stubbornness to keep adapting. Marcus had been an elementary school science teacher. He coached Little League on Saturdays. He owned 3 houseplants and had once grown tomatoes on his apartment balcony. Badly but earnestly. That modest knowledge combined with a public library system he'd spend weeks excavating from rubble became the most valuable skill set in the Gray Belt. He is not alone. He moves in loose orbit around others, a veterinarian named Donna who learned human medicine by necessity, a retired electrical engineer named Hector who keeps a hand-crank radio operational, and a 14-year-old girl named Priya whose father was a botanist and who memorized his notebooks before the fires took them. But there are others who move through this zone at night. A group from the south side who don't trade and don't talk. They take. And they've been getting closer. They call themselves the Ration Men. And Marcus has no idea yet what they're willing to do to control the last functioning food source in 40 miles. Marcus wakes before light. Not dawn, because dawn no longer announces itself. He wakes by body clock at what he estimates is 5 a.m. and immediately checks the humidity gauge he built from a hair strand and a paper clip. It reads dry. Again. Food is rationed by caloric calculation, not preference. The group runs on roughly 900 calories per person per day. Less than half the recommended intake. Malnutrition has made itself visible on everyone's bodies. Donna tracks symptoms with a worn clipboard, hair loss, bleeding gums, a cognitive fog that makes simple decisions feel like calculus. Scurvy is returning to America for the first time in a century. Water collection is a full-time job. Rain can't be trusted. Testing strips salvaged from a pool supply store register radioactive contamination in every sample above trace levels. Their system involves a triple-stage filter, gravel, activated charcoal scraped from burnt wood, and boiling over fuel they can barely spare. Cesium-137, with its 30-year half-life, doesn't boil out. It binds to muscle tissue and mimics potassium, which means no amount of filtering makes the water entirely safe, only less immediately lethal. And that's when everything changed one Tuesday afternoon in month 18. Marcus was checking the perimeter wire, a string of tin cans around their shelter, when he heard the Geiger counter Hector kept mounted on the south wall begin to click faster. Not a spike, a sustained elevation. Something large and radioactive was moving through the building 2 blocks east. He took the fire axe. He went alone because sending 2 people meant weakening the food operation. He found the source, a feral dog, wandering through a collapsed pharmacy, its gait wrong, lurching wrong paced, the neurological signature of radiation damage to the cerebellum. He watched it for 8 minutes from a second-floor window, barely breathing. Then it turned and looked directly at him. Its eyes were clouded white. He did not move for a long time after it left. The dog was a symptom, not the problem. The actual crisis arrived 6 days later in the form of insects. Specifically, a colony of what appeared to be a hybrid variant of the common blowfly, Calliphora vomitoria, mutated by sustained radiation exposure into something that reproduced twice as fast and could survive in temperatures no blowfly should tolerate. They had colonized the group's primary growing tunnel, a 40-foot stretch of repurposed highway underpass where Marcus had managed to germinate seeds under LED lights powered by Hector's solar rig. The larvae were consuming root systems, not eating foliage. Eating roots, burrowing into the growing medium and destroying the nutrient uptake architecture of plants from below. By the time anyone noticed, 1/3 of the tunnel's growth had been compromised. And this was the moment Marcus understood that the nuclear war hadn't just changed the weather and the politics. It had changed the biology of everything competing with them for survival. And the things competing with them were adapting faster. He had 72 hours before the larvae reached the seed can's offspring. The tomatoes, the kale, the 3 surviving bean varieties. He needed to think like a pest control specialist when he'd never been one. What happened next would haunt him for the rest of his life. But it would also save everyone. Priya remembered something from her father's notebooks. Diatomaceous earth. The fossilized remains of microscopic algae. Physically damages insect exoskeletons through abrasion, causing dehydration and death without chemical toxicity. It had been used in organic farming for decades, and hardware stores, Marcus realized, used to stock it in pool filter sections. 3 hours of dangerous scavenging later, he returned with enough to treat the entire tunnel floor. They spread it in a ring formation, Priya directing the geometry with a focus that made Marcus feel like the student, not the teacher. It worked. Imperfectly, with losses, but it worked. But the deeper innovation came from the crisis itself. The tunnel system needed to be expanded. More than that, it needed to be rethought. Using salvaged greenhouse thermal film layered against the tunnel walls, Hector created a reflective system that bounced their precious LED light back through the growing medium at multiple angles, increasing photosynthetic exposure by an estimated 40%. Priya suggested angling the beds at 23 degrees, matching the angle sunlight used to arrive at in spring. The cost, Hector's back gave out from the construction work. He now moves with a limp that wasn't there 2 months ago. And Marcus knows they have maybe 3 more months of battery capacity before the solar system degrades beyond their repair capability. Hector picked up a radio signal last week, automated, repeating, broadcasting coordinates 200 miles north. It claims to be a functioning seed vault with electricity. Columbus in month 23 is governed by a thing called the Compact, a handshake agreement between 9 survivor groups controlling different districts. It sounds like civilization. It functions like warlordism with paperwork. Food is currency. Not canned goods, not gold, actual growing capacity. And the Compact taxes it. 1/5 of any functional harvest goes into a central reserve that is theoretically shared. In practice, the 3 largest groups control distribution, and the mathematics are flexible when convenient. Marcus's tunnel operation makes his group powerful and vulnerable simultaneously. Known food sources attract attention. The ration men already know about them. Donna found a boot print outside the tunnel entrance that belonged to no one in their group. Beyond Ohio, the world has its own grief. Canada's agricultural collapse has sent 2 million refugees south into a border that no longer exists in any legal sense. Europe is rationing wheat. India has declared a national emergency over the monsoon failure. Nuclear winter disrupted global atmospheric circulation patterns and the Indian Ocean's thermal systems, either which drive monsoon rains may not recover for a decade. The world is not watching America. The world is doing the same thing as Marcus, staring at empty ground, trying to make something grow where the light no longer reaches. He found the photograph on a Tuesday, or what he believed was Tuesday. It was wedged in the door frame of the elementary school he used to teach in, a class photo laminated from 3 years before the war. He recognized his students. He recognized the boy in the 3rd row whose father used to yell at Little League games. Marcus stood in that hallway for a very long time. His hands did not shake. That was the thing that scared him most. That his hands did not shake anymore. He used to be a man who flinched at loud sounds, who teared up at graduation ceremonies, who called his mother every Sunday, and he placed the photograph in the coffee can next to the seeds. Then he went back to work. Not because he had hope, because the kale needed water, and if he stopped, he would have to think about what Sunday used to sound like. The coffee can. Here is what was inside it, what Marcus had been protecting for 714 days. 31 seed varieties vacuum-sealed in small packets by his daughter the summer before the war because she'd read about seed saving in a book and decided it was interesting. She was 9. She was methodical about it in the way only 9-year-olds can be, labeled in purple marker, sorted by plant family. She did not survive month 1. Marcus plants her seeds in the dark under artificial light in a tunnel under a collapsed city. Every germinated seedling is a small, irrational argument against the end of everything. His plan, if it can be called that, is to reach the coordinates in the radio signal, to find whatever functioning infrastructure remains and bring seeds and knowledge and Donna's medical skills and Priya's memory of her father's notebooks to whatever community is rebuilding there. The most shocking thing Marcus does in month 19 is not violent, not desperate. He gives half his remaining seeds to a stranger. A woman from the east side he's never met, who has a child and knows how to farm and asked. He doesn't know if she'll make it. He doesn't know if the seeds will germinate in her location. He doesn't know if the signal to the north is real or a trap. But here is the question that no one in the gray belt can answer yet. The question that will define whether humanity rebuilds or simply continues dying slowly. When the sky finally clears, and it will clear eventually, will there be anyone left who still knows how to make something grow?